9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nana Queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
Theatres and drama schools are being offered plus-size inclusivity training. Come on, seriously, is this really a thing? In order to tackle fat phobia, to apparently make the theatre more inclusive for bigger bodies, a lady called Ruth Ann Phillips, who is a plus-size theatre director, she's behind the drive. Now, apparently, her own research, so it's not exactly independent, showed that 9 out of 10 respondents should have training on size inclusion. Ruth is also the co-founder of Inclusion Collective, which is an organisation that provides training in creative well-being, body positivity and inclusive movement. Her website contains resources on fat activism, advocacy for the rights and dignity of fat people, combating discrimination and the body-conscious scale. This is actually about health. Ruth is conflating the two. Professor Carol Sikora, a consultant oncologist, said normalising obesity has become fashionable in advertising and the media simply to sell stuff, but it's got nothing to do with celebrating diversity. Nobody needs to be fat. It's like encouraging risky behaviours such as smoking, driving after a booze-up or lying like a lobster on the beach in the sun. A balanced diet and lots of exercise are the cornerstones of a healthy lifestyle. He went on to say, how can anybody possibly justify these projects? Plus-size inclusivity training, please bring back common sense. Well, exactly. I'm for equal opportunity and for giving people credit based on merit and what they bring to the table, even if it is food. Only joking. That's where the way to my heart is through my gut. I'm looking for a man that can cook. But in truth, being obese can be dangerous. And whilst I absolutely agree you should love what God gave you, obesity is the biggest killer and costs the health service a fortune. People come in all shapes and sizes, and it's a wonderful thing. But to conflate body positivity with obesity is very dangerous.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a moment, headliners, but first let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines. And today has been a record day for migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats. GB News can reveal that at least 750 illegal migrants arrived in UK waters today, surpassing the previous one-day record of 711 on May the 1st. That means more than 41,000 migrants have now made the crossing since Rishi Sunak promised to end the crisis in January last year. That comes as an election debate programme tonight took place with 7 representatives from the main political parties on Channel 4. Reform UK's chairman, Richard Tice, addressed the record number of small boat crossings.
To pick people up out of the boats and take them back to France, that will stop the deaths. That's the compassionate thing to do. That will stop the illegal trade. Under the 1982 UN Convention of Law at Sea, France has international obligations in order to pick people up and take back. They're failing in those obligations. We're entitled to do that. That's the kind thing to do. It will stop people dying.
Richard Tice. Well, Nigel Farage says he'd abolish the TV licence fee, which funds the BBC. The Reform UK leader was speaking during a town hall-style event this afternoon. It comes as the BBC said it would allow Reform to take part in an extra Question Time Leaders special after Mr Farage's team complained that they hadn't been included. The Prime Minister has said it's his moral mission to cut taxes as he continues to criticise Labour's tax plans. Rishi Sunak made his comments ahead of official figures on inflation due to be released tomorrow. The Tories said they were launching their plan to cut taxes tomorrow, pointing to their manifesto promises of tax cuts worth over £17 billion. Meanwhile, Labour said today it's going to bring back face-to-face banking to Britain's high streets, with plans to open 350 new banking hubs in towns and villages. That would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. The consumer group Which says more than 6,000 branches have closed since 2015. And the Liberal Democrats were campaigning today as well. They promised to spend £10 million a year to tackle the practice of sewage dumping by water companies. The new quality inspectors would work as part of a newly created Clean Water Authority. And the Russian president has arrived in North Korea this evening. That's according to Russian state media. That's his first state visit there for 24 years. Vladimir Putin is due to hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine, before continuing on to Vietnam later in the week for further meetings with political figures. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Time now for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Wednesday's newspapers. I'm Simon Evans, tonight joined by two top comedians, the uncompromising Leo Kearse and his cordial companion, Steve N. Allen. Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, I am compromised.
You are.
That's what you're implying.
Are you in all kinds of important ways? Compromat.
Oh, yeah, there are pictures.
Let's have a look at our front pages then tonight. We have the Daily Mail kicking us off, as always, with the Labour's secret tax rise dossier. We have Telegraph, Britain 20 years behind Europe on cancer care, and an extraordinary hat to illustrate that. Guardian, NHS will buy beds in care homes to cut hospital waits, say Labour. The Times, Starmer tax threat to savers with a chequebook. iNews, UK in secret talks over financial turmoil at IT giant that could hit benefits and the NHS. That's a tongue twister. And finally, the Daily Star, rise of the bog snackers. Well, those were your front pages. And about rise of the bog snackers, that's been well established for some years now.
I want to watch that film. That sounds wicked. That sounds better than...
It's very Cronenberg. It's got a bit of Body Shock to it. Anyway, The Guardian we're going to kick off with, despite that.
I've got the Mail.
Oh, have you got the Mail? I'm sorry, I've drumped one, obviously. Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So basically, the Mail is leading with Labour's secret tax rise dossier. So this is the official manifesto submission from a group of MPs, which includes Starmer, proposing 6 raids from targeting family homes to inheritance and wealth taxes. So this is pretty much laying out that Labour, now that they see that they're going to win, they're already saying these are all the nasty things we're going to do. Yeah. So you can't say, once we're in, you can't say, oh, but we thought you were going to be nice. You said nice things when you're trying to get elected. So they're going to come for people's savings. Starmer has already said that working people don't have savings, which is absolute nonsense. Stupid people don't have savings, or people whose expenditure exceeds their income. So Starmer's basically ushering in the end of private property. He's going to come after if anybody's got savings, if you own a home, if you've got any form of wealth. He's probably going to come after ISAs as well. Which savings
feels to me like a slightly old-fashioned way of saying investments or any kind of money that you aren't going to be spending before the end of your paycheck. I suppose it depends. Some people would picture an old-fashioned savings account. Yeah. But in other people, there are ISAs and so on. But there are also other ways of saving, aren't there?
But all this stuff, any sort of savings or investment is vital for a country, because that's where companies that need capital to make capital investment and create businesses and create jobs, that's where they get their money from. Absolutely. It can't all come from the government, because the government's useless.
You'll be familiar with John Maynard Keynes and his general theory, of course. This was the primary proposition. Yeah.
However, your timeline's wrong in this. This story actually has the timeline the other way than you've just spelled it out. It's not that they think they're going to win, so now they're telling you some truths so they can say it later. This was a year ago that they came up with this document as one of the source documents for what would eventually become their manifesto. It was nixed early doors before it even got to the stage of working out what's in the manifesto. And since then, the full document includes capital gains and council tax reform that have both been listed as ones that they will not be doing. And what's the other thing that you said? I can't remember.
Savings.
No, well...
ISIS?
ISIS, terrible. We don't even worry about these
anymore. They're not going to tax ISIS.
That would be one way of... in all the debates, Starmer now says he's trying to make an economy that is wealth-creating, which actually would increase savings.
Yeah.
But other than that, I totally agree with
He has said that, working people are those who don't have savings. And so to hit people who have savings, it's in the same sort of ballpark as private school VAT or whatever, which does seem to be a little bit reckless.
Yeah, I mean, although that's only like 7% of school kids go to those schools, more than 7% of people have savings, otherwise we wouldn't have an economy.
Yeah.
So I agree with that.
So are they going to tax them or not?
Well, no, by the looks of it.
Hostage to fortune.
Somehow the Daily Mail are spinning it that they will. It's almost as if the Daily Mail don't like Starmer.
It's a secret tax rise dossier.
Oh, it's secret. That's why they didn't say it. Oh,
that's why you didn't know about it.
Well, your turn to balance out that partisan assessment now with The Guardian, Steve.
So there you go with NHS will buy beds in care homes to cut hospital wait, say Labour. This is a plan that West Streeting says because the bed blocking is causing not only a huge cost financially, but in terms of lives, the number of beds that they can't have use for, they'll use some of the NHS money to buy these beds in care homes, move the people into there, get people in the actual hospital beds. Well, this is some kind of crazy untested scheme. No, it's the Leeds Teaching Hospital started doing it. It's working really well.
OK.
And West Streeting's doing this a lot, having an idea that one hospital's got something that's working and then thinking, why don't we replicate this across the system?
Well, the obvious question is, why have these care homes got empty beds? I thought care homes were fairly busy as well these days.
Some of them free up quite quickly.
Do they? What about the Nightingale hospitals that were built over the course of a long weekend and never used? Why can't they just... If it's all you want is a bed, if you don't need actual medical equipment, why don't we just put some of those
People need those football stadiums back for football now.
Is that where they were?
Or places like that,
I guess. It was on Blackheath, wasn't it? So that they were handy for the burial mounds, if necessary.
Wow.
Let's have a look at the Telegraph, Leo.
So the Telegraph does have that woman with an amazing hat. I wonder how many ostriches died for that hat. But the story we're looking at is that we need a COVID fine amnesty. It says the ex-Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland. So he oversaw the courts during the pandemic, so oversaw a lot of people getting arrested for COVID-related offences. And he says there should be an amnesty. We should just want to wipe the slate clean for more than 29,000 people who are given criminal convictions for breaking COVID rules. I'd say give them a medal as well for daring to do the sensible thing and break the rules.
The funny thing is, they should. I absolutely agree. They should give them amnesty. They should have done it 20 years ago, and it would have killed Partygate as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
20 years ago would have been somewhat
2 years ago, rather, in 2020. They should have done it immediately, as soon as the Partygate stuff came out.
They should have done it.
They should have just gone, you know what, it was all nonsense and we apologise.
They should have done it because of Partygate. I'm not saying this should be the rule for anything, like if a Prime Minister commits a crime, then we all get to do it. But as soon as the people who were making the laws and telling you to stick to these rules were shown to have been breaking it, that's it, game's off.
As soon as Neil Ferguson was caught having one, on the patio.
Yeah.
You remember him?
Yeah, the guy. And also she was called Stats. I mean, what are the chances of some guys really into numbers and stuff going out with a woman called Stats? But yeah, I mean, and also I think we need to, instead of those people getting fined, instead of the people who broke the COVID rules, we need to start fining some of the people who are right Stasi creeps during COVID. I remember there's a comedian, Matt Green. In fact, you probably worked with him. I probably shouldn't slate him. But he was something about like his neighbours were having a barbecue and there was like 7 people instead of 6 people. It's like, why don't you stop twitching the curtains, you little grass?
I was actually on with him last weekend.
Right.
We had a chat about this and that, but that didn't come up, funny enough.
She said that, didn't she? She wanted people to spy on their neighbours.
Yeah. She didn't want Matt Green to do it. That's certainly not why he was doing it anyway. It was not taking his orders from Priti Patel.
He doesn't have enough testosterone.
It's funny, though, we've got 2 stories on that front page, Daily Telegraph. The other one, Britain 20 years behind Europe on cancer care. And in a way, they reflect the same thing, which is that COVID created an awful lot of backlogs of one kind or another, many of which just need to be cleared out now, and we need to get a fresh start. I mean, I remember, it must be nearly 10 years ago now. Was it Newtree came in? Was that 10 years ago? All the historic sex crime. I know 2 or 3 people who work in the criminal law, judges and barristers and so on, said this ridiculous backlog of cases, some of them 30 years ago, that are just blocking up the system and preventing us from actually dealing with crimes that are being committed now, and that, you need to disincentivise the activities of criminals rather than digging out 78-year-old prep school masters who have... Did I? I can't remember.
Let's see a picture.
Anyway, finally ending the section with the Daily Star, Steve.
Yeah, speaking of blocking up the system, rise of the bog snackers. A quarter of Gen Zs admit to eating as they sit on the toilet. You know that phrase, don't whoop where you eat?
Yeah.
Which is a metaphor for not having an affair at work.
That's right.
Turns out people are where they eat, so there are going to be a lot of affair-based, work-based affairs. It says, let's hope they wash their hands first. I've been thinking about this one. You wash your hands after you've done the paperwork, so is it actually OK? Your hands should be as clean as before you've gone anywhere near the toilet. If you're, I think I've overthought this.
Wash them twice.
Why not? Soap's cheap. Yeah, knock yourself out. But a quarter of young
Well, as
adults...
long as you're eating, presumably this is a chocolate bar rather than a sort of a chicken or a Chinese steak.
He's got a double-decker burger there.
Oh, he has.
And that's quite. I mean, that's quite a flimsy contraption. Those things tend to fall apart in your hands. So
you start picking up. But
it's full in the gusset as well. Yeah. But it's a one-in, one-out system. I'm all for it.
What is the incentive? Is it just like trying to minimise the amount of time you're away from the desk? I mean, I cannot quite see.
I think it's made up.
Is it?
Yeah.
Boffins? Boffins making things up. That's the exteriors looked at. Coming up, we dip our toe in the water for the sexiest MPs, the return of Boris, and the kids. They're not all right. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Plenty of mixers, plenty of lovely gin.
Yes.
What have you got here for us? Just explain what you've brought in.
So today I'm going to be presenting the Cotswolds Dry Gin and the Cotswolds Wildflower Gin.
Ooh.
So the first one that was introduced into our market was the Cotswolds Dry Gin. Now we have 9 different types of botanicals. We introduce into our pot still. We introduce well, obviously juniper berries because it's a London dry. Angelica roots and coriander seeds, giving it that little limey flavour. Also, cardamom seeds, then black peppercorn, giving it a little spice. Ooh. And then the part that is more interesting that regards to the pouring, we have the grapefruit peel and the lime peel. We're going to start with the Cotswolds Dry. Okay, so the first one introduced.
So Ellie was taking the mick out of me this morning because I said my favourite gin was, what is it, pink lemonade?
You like a pink gin and lemonade, yes.
You called me, I'm going to say what you said. You said that's a bit girly.
As you see, it turned into cloudy. Those are the oils of the spices because we don't filter it. Our gin is completely unfiltered.
Got it.
I love this. It's 11:52. It's never too early. Cheers.
Cheers.
And would you have any, this sounds very juvenile, would you have any snacks with gin? Or does it ruin it?
Olives.
Ah, you can tell your culture.
It depends on how you're drinking it and where you are, like what you're actually going to do with it. Yeah. But you can have pretty much all sorts. As long as it stays on the salty side, that's what I would go for personally.
A salty snack.
Yeah, that's what I would go for.
So olives, would you say, is that a good choice? Or crisps, nuts?
They're quite salty olives, aren't they?
It depends on your taste, really. Like personally, I wouldn't go for it, but I have seen. And the culture behind gin is drastically increased over the years. The flavours are all different.
That's really good.
Exactly. You see what I mean?
Oh, very nice.
Like that zesty, floral kind of flavour coming through. They're absolutely stunning, aren't they?
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, still joined by comedians Leo Kerr, Steve N. Allen. Leo, we crack open this section with the Daily Star, who have finally conducted the only poll that really counts, the one that has sexy MPs draped all over it.
Yeah, sexy MPs, if that's not an oxymoron. So they've done a poll to find out who the sexiest politicians are, and guess who the top 2 people are? Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman. And the Tories beat Labour overall as the sexiest party, and Reform UK is the 3rd sexiest party. We could just replace elections with this. I think it's pretty much the same thing. So so Farage was number 1 on the men's side, followed by Johnny Mercer, and then Keir Starmer coming in 3rd. He's got that sort of 50s 50s style. And then
50s style inflatable dad.
Yeah, 50s style Soviet economics. And also Jacob Rees-Mogg came fourth. On the women's side, we still have women until Keir Starmer gets in, and it raises them. So Suella Braverman was number one, then it was Rosina Aline Khan, and then Esther McVeigh, yeah. And it's basically this is a press release from illicitencounters.com.
Oh, OK.
So this is just an advertised.
So it's Life is Too Short, Have an Affair, the political version. Yeah.
Have an affair with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Johnny Mercer is a bit of a matinee idol. I would never forgive him for abandoning Roger Scruton in his hour of need. But he's quite a rugged sort of archetype.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure that I see the Rees-Mogg. I mean, he's sired 7 children, I suppose. So maybe it's simply statistical.
The man's side of this is basically name recognition.
Yeah.
If you're well known enough, you're on the list. The female side of it, I think they're missing Priti Patel. Back in 2017,
I was going to say that.
There was a civil servant who got paid £25,000 for being bullied by her. And at the time, I remember thinking, in those heels, I would have paid her to bully me. So
I can't help wondering if some of the votes for Suella Braverman are just people who got confused.
Could be that. But the whole thing's meant to be light-hearted.
Kind of the sadistic Home Secretary, that one.
They're relatively interchangeable.
That sounds like a selection option on a website.
Try and narrow it down.
But the whole thing's meant to be light-hearted, but we actually had this conversation recently, and I, without really any humour, was saying Laura Trott. She'd have got 60% of the vote. She more than 16. She'd be like 50%. Come on, have a look at Laura Trott.
OK.
Whoa.
I'm trying to remember the name. There was one under John Major, a Tory. She and her husband were both in the government at the same time. What was her name? Bottomley. Virginia
Bottomley. Yeah. What about Angela Rayner? I'm surprised Angela
Eric Morecambe.
Independent now, Steve, and the Tories have just remembered that they too once had a popular jocular leader with the ability to cut through.
Boris Johnson pulled into Tory campaign with personalised letters to voters, but may still snub Rishi Sunak. This is funny. This is like putting Harold Bishop back in Neighbours. You're getting desperate for viewers. Quick, get someone doing a cameo from 3 series ago. Supportive letters from the ex-MP are due to land on doorsteps. This is Boris Johnson. And let's remember, this is Boris Johnson we're talking about. He's probably written some non-supportive letters, one of each, and he'll go with whichever one he feels like, because he is a man of principles. And if it's anything like his Daily Mail column, it'll be about cheese and it'll cost $500,000 to pay him to do this. It says he's been parachuted in. He's not. He's still on holiday. They've just got him to write a thing, and they've
droned in.
He's been droned in, very much so. And a spokesperson said for Mr. Johnson said he will not be drawn on whether or not he will mention Mr. Sunak, so whether he's still snubbing this. Either way, newspapers managed to get 800 words out of this because they don't know or not whether he's going to be mentioned.
The question to me, as forgive my ignorance, is he standing again? Is he going to be a No, he's out of Parliament altogether. Did he stand down, in fact, already?
He resigned so that they couldn't suspend him from the Commons.
Yes, OK.
Straight out.
So has there been a by-election in his constituency, which I won't mention because, of course, then I'll have to mention everybody else or whatever. But, there has been.
There was.
Yeah. OK. I couldn't remember whether he was technically still an MP.
And I can't remember if it went to the Liberal Democrats or something.
Because of the Heathrow issue around there. On the ULEZ. The ULEZ thing is... I was about to say the name of the place. But don't worry, if this doesn't work, there is an AI
So in a couple of years' time, he'll be in the House of Lords anyway, and then he'll be, sitting next to Lord Cameron, and, they'll carve up the place between them. The Telegraph now, Leo, Nigel Farage paid £144,000 to a vetting firm that let him down. Gross.
So
number joke. 144.
Oh, really? Yeah. Are all your references from 1923? Anyway,
I'll check that one on the abacus and it works.
So Farage threatens a reform vetting firm with legal action. Not a reform vetting firm, the vetting firm that did the vetting for reform, or didn't do it, apparently. Reform signed a contract with vetting.com in April and paid it £144,000, which is how many farthings? To weed out parliamentary candidates with extremist views. So they'd seen what had happened to the Green Party, and they wanted to make sure they didn't get any candidates being like,
they must not shout Heil Hitler when they win.
So the contract said vetting.com would carry out social media checks on named individuals, but Reform has been hit by a series of disclosures about candidates, including one who described Hitler as brilliant at using personality traits to inspire people to action. And this is the thing, a lot of the exposés of the Reform candidates candidates. It's like a social media post from like 12 years ago that was sort of making you can see the point they're making, that if you cherry pick certain letters and rearrange them in a different way, you can make him sound like a Nazi.
There was a book called The Dark Charisma of Adolf Hitler, written by, I think I'm going to say Lawrence Rees, who is definitely is a Jewish historian, and he wrote a book about the Holocaust and so on. He's not approving of it.
Yeah.
But it is called The Dark Charisma of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
And then somebody else quoted from that and said, I think we can learn something from this book, guys, and was on his LinkedIn thing and was immediately sacked and everything.
Yeah.
It's very... You can understand why it's a third rail to even mention Adolf Hitler as, in any sort of learning...
Like, hang on, guys, let's not judge this guy too harshly. It's an odd phrase.
So the company's co-owned by Colin Bloom, who's linked to the Conservative Party. He's been an advisor for the Conservative Party before, so I mean, I guess there's questions, were they stitched up? Were they stitched up, or was this vetting firm just a little bit lazy? Or were they not expecting people to dig back 12 years in, social media posts?
I don't know, 144,000, 12 years, it's all falling into place.
That's the beautiful mind over there. It's spotted the patterns.
Mighty ready reckoner is twitching. I do feel that is a significant sum of money to just kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for about $5,000, I would have Googled their names and the word Hitler and see what comes up and solved all of this. It's not that tricky. But the spinning it as kind of, we're the victims of some big scam. You're the victims of incompetence and you've overpaid for it, instead of making it look like there's some big conspiracy to somehow leave us with all of these people standing who are a bit dodgy. The big question is, why have you got that many dodgy people standing for your party? One of the people were dead. You don't do your checks.
They're not that dodgy. I mean, like
Well, the guy said, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't have gone to war with Hitler. We should have appeased him some more.
We had that conversation on here, and I find it depends exactly the tone of voice in which he said it. But as I say, that was a debate that was had in the House of Commons, and we were seconds away from having Lord Halifax as Prime Minister, who would have done precisely that.
Yeah.
There was a long pause, which is recounted in several history books, when everything hung in the balance, and then Churchill decided he would take it on.
They didn't have the benefit of hindsight during that debate, though.
No, it was in 1941. This was not in 1936 or something. This is not appeasement. This is after the catastrophe at Dunkirk and the war in Norway.
All right.
Battle of Norway. This was it was quite obvious what had happened.
Yeah.
The Greater Germany had been established at that point.
I'm still thinking...
And the front with Russia was, if not open, then certainly they were starting to unroll the shutters.
But in 2024, if you're the Reform Party, do you want these people standing for you? It turns out no, because if the checking people would have checked, they would have got rid of them.
But I think what we really need to do is change our culture from one in which social media posts are dug up from 12 years ago and misinterpreted to make people look bad.
Very hard to do that. You'd pay a lot more than 144 grand to change the culture. Staying with reform in the Daily Mail now, Stephen, a counter-argument to the anxiety over working from home.
Yes, Reform's UK co-deputy leader, it sounds like the Greens, doesn't it, has said that it's a travesty that working mothers don't have enough time for their children. This is Dr David Bull, who suggested that children desperately need a parent at home. Now, you can say that children benefit from having parents near them without that immediately implying you're saying anyone else who doesn't fit that set is doing terribly. But that's the way the debates go. Like, oh, how dare you? What about single mothers? What about people who work? And he's not saying any of that.
He's not, no.
I've worked with David. I've done some Jeremy Vines with him and some talk stuff with him. He's hardly like some regressive traditionalist. Openly gay, goes to Pride all the time. He's not going to be sending us back to the 1950s. I think if you look at what he's saying, it's about... Actually, let's do the quote. It's about giving parents the choice to spend more time with their children.
Yeah.
Firstly, this is the Reform contract. It'll never be a government policy. Relax, cool your jets. And then secondly, the choice is good. I've got that choice. I'm lucky that I get to choose to spend most of my days at home with my kids and then come and work in the evenings and whatnot. The problem is when you get in a situation where financially you can't afford that choice, where both parents have to work, there's nothing wrong with saying maybe that's doing some harm.
Yeah, well, you have to, as you say, try and give people the option, but at the same time, that isn't free.
Yeah, and this seems like a sensible policy. And even though you're saying it's got no chance of being government policy, I mean, Reform might not get into government, but I think policies like this could be stolen by smart governments. They plan to support marriage through the tax system and front-load child benefit between the ages of 1 and 4. I mean, currently the benefit system favours couples splitting up because then they get more money. So, there's something wrong.
Bad incentives, you're right. Further woes of children in The Guardian as well, Leo. Surprisingly, they're not blaming working mums. In fact, it is instead privilege.
Yeah, so an alarming lack of access to green space is fueling the UK child obesity crisis, doctors warn. So child obesity is already a significant public health problem, but medics and public health experts say that poor access to playing fields and playgrounds at state schools is contributing to worsening and wider health inequalities, which is leading to huge levels of obesity. And this is tying in. They keep hammering. they keep hammering this thing. They say children at the top 250 English private schools have more than 10 times as much outdoor space as those who go to state schools. It's like, yeah, that's because, you know, those kids' parents have worked hard, got loads of money, send their kids to a good school. That's aspirational.
Oh, at the very least,
the left want to shut down private schools. Why would you shut down private schools if they're so great and they provide all this green space to people? And also, The Guardian wants to fill the country with everyone from the rest of the world who wants to come here, and they're saying, oh, but we've got all this green space we can build on. That's going to mean there's less green space for kids to play on.
The irony is, of course, there is loads of green space, but it's just a bus ride away, isn't it? Or maybe a couple of hours away to get to it. But like 9/10 of the country is green space. It is sad that kids don't see much of it.
But they're not just talking about the colour of the land that you're stood on. This is about having the opportunity to play sports at school, which then makes a habit of doing something other than just sitting on your backside playing computer games, and therefore you go from being a fat kid to a fat adult if you don't do anything about it.
So, I mean, they're saying green space, but do they really mean athletic sports, team sports and so on? Because that's different, getting out of breath and so on. I agree with you, but there's a psychological benefit to actually seeing nature. There is definitely a psychological benefit, I think, from being, like, really having quite a lot of space around you. I like it.
It's a really good incentive to get rich.
I think they're two separate issues, though, because I've read a lot of that recently, and people saying getting out to nature is good for you. And I think what they're missing is getting away from people is good for you. That's why people love a field with no one in it, because there's no one in it. It's not about the greens and other people.
That's the halfway mark. Coming up, we have the meanness of billionaires, 1 million new Americans, and what's next for Gary Lineker. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's staying fairly dry and fine as we head into Wednesday. Sunny spells for many of us. Another dry day on the cards, however. Across the far northwest, there are weather fronts approaching, but for many of us, we've got high pressure dominating across the UK, and that's bringing all that dry and fine weather. Through this evening, though, there's a risk of some heavy showers still continuing for some northern areas of England, but elsewhere, a dry and clear night to come for many of us. We will see the clearest skies across the far northwest of Scotland. Northern Ireland too, where temperatures could dip down into the low single figures, but for most of us to start the day, we'll be at around 10 or 11 degrees. A little bit fresher tomorrow morning than this morning, but still plenty of sunshine around. Let's take a closer look at how things look first thing tomorrow. And actually, where it's been quite cloudy across the far north of Scotland lately, it's going to be a much brighter start tomorrow despite the chillier feel. And that sunshine will be spread quite widely across the UK into Northern Ireland, northern areas of England, North Wales. There'll be some cloud around here and there, but generally Wednesday's going to be a fairly fine day. And actually, an onshore breeze across the far southeast could bring a slightly fresher feel here. But for most of us, plenty of sunshine to come through tomorrow. Sunny spells into the afternoon. Cloud will bubble up a little bit. That may allow the odd shower to break out here and there, perhaps across the southwest, but I think you'd be pretty unlucky to get caught out in a shower. However, a different story for the far northwest of Scotland, into the Western Isles and the Highlands, where a weather front is approaching. Now in the sunshine, highs of around 23 degrees to come in the southeast, but widely into the high teens for many of us. Thursday's looking like another dry and bright day for the bulk of the UK. Temperatures climbing towards 24, possibly 25 degrees on Thursday, but weather fronts never too far away from the far northwest, which means it will be a little bit cloudier with a risk of rain here. But actually, the further south and east you are, the more likely you are to see more in the way of sunshine and temperatures climbing. Bye-bye.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Steve, we will kick off this section with reports of some properly Dickensian attitudes to the domestics, courtesy of Britain's richest family.
Yeah, Britain's richest family, the Hindujas, spent more on dog than paid servant. So they've been accused of...
family dog rather than as a snack.
Yes, well, and they also hadn't trained it to do, the footman work. But the egregious mistreatment of domestic staff in their Lake Geneva villa, £6.20 for an 18-hour work day. That's how you stay rich, guys. You got to cut back on your spending. They had a budget spreadsheet that was listed for dog expenses that listed 7k. So that's why they say they're spending more on the dog. The staff had their passports confiscated to limit their freedom. To be fair, the dogs didn't have a passport. That's 1-0. In defence of the Hinduja families, the lawyers said that the staff were treated respectfully and were given accommodation and were allowed on the couch. So there are still many wins, to be honest. Honestly, one of the points was like, yeah, it seems low, paying £6.20 for a work day, but they also got food. I don't think you've made it that much better. How much food did they get through to only earn £6 for the day? And the lawyers also said that they voluntarily came back to work again, because, when people are desperate, it really shows that they must absolutely love it. The lawyer then said they've changed the way they hire people. The quote was, "You will not find a single employee who says they were hired by the family," because they've been told what will happen if they don't. They'll be fed to the dogs, who probably eat really well.
Quite scary. Are they? I mean, they're given accommodation and food. They're more like au pairs, are they, than servants? Well,
no, if you're working an 18-hour day, you don't have time to get home and get back again in the morning, so they live on site.
It's very Downton Abbey, isn't it? Really? Yeah.
With those prices, not just for inflation.
Is there a suggestion of human trafficking here? I mean, that's what it sounds like. If you're working for this kind of money in Geneva, it's not. This is not capable of being absorbed by the usual.
It says they held their passports, I think. Does it?
Yeah,
they held their passports. But, I mean, why would you just walk out? I wouldn't care if you had my passport. I'm not doing this for £6.20. Are you nuts?
I think the very large estate, you might not make it to the
world. No, I think this is nonsense. And also, it's a sign of, this is diversity. When we want to import other cultures, this is what some other cultures are like. So this is good.
But it's in Geneva, right?
This is a strength.
Yeah.
It's our greatest strength.
They're not actually doing it here, though. This is in their house in Geneva.
Yeah.
There is a part of me who likes to see Geneva drag through the mud like this. They're always lording it over us, aren't they, with various conventions and what have you.
So it's various Geneva giving it all that about conventions.
There's nothing in the Geneva Convention that says you can't do this.
Leo, it seems the American people has lost the government's confidence, and now the government is minded to dissolve that people and elect another.
So President Biden has announced the most extensive expansion of migration into the United States during his time in office by offering a path to citizenship for as many as 500,000 undocumented migrants. Wow. So this is, when you read it like that, it sounds like this is terrible. The people who come across the border are just all going to be given an amnesty and all going to be given citizenship because the way it feels and the way it looks to a lot of Americans, especially MAGA Republicans, is that it's just it's an unfair immigration system where people from Europe and a lot of the civilized world are discriminated against because, I can't go to Mexico and walk across the border.
Well, you can, of course, and many do. In fact, a lot of people coming across the border are Chinese, apparently, rather not Mexican and
civilized world. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like French. Stuff
why
like
don't
that.
you do it? That would be interesting.
Sweden.
3 years of cleaning pools in California.
Norway.
You could do it. Why don't you do it?
I've got a family. I've got a family now. But basically, it's in this. It seems to mainly relate to spouses.
Right, okay.
American citizens.
So they've married into families once they cross the border?
Or they've just, they've gone there and... I guess they're saying this is going to protect you against the Republicans getting in and then saying, any spouses. So say, somebody's moved there and has a wife who hasn't got citizenship or whatever, then they're going to protect those families from being broken up.
It's like a green card rehash. In fact, that film now is old enough because the two things to qualify, you have to have lived there for a decade at the start of this week, too late, you missed it, and be married to an American citizen. So,
but it will be a vote winner for the Latino, Latina, Latinx community, won't it?
say that though, Trump claims to get the vote from that community now, so maybe he's getting it.
It's certainly going to be a vote winner for the Democrats in the future, and this whole open borders policy is good. I mean, that's why they do it. That's why the Democrats do it. That's why Labour does it in the UK, because they know that those people that come in are going to tend to vote leftwards.
That is
so
the expectation, although it's not always reliable, is it? A lot of them more conservative and Christian and so on.
Yeah, and also a lot of Conservative governments keep the open border because they want cheap workers. They want people to work at their Geneva villa. But, I mean, democracy in certain parts of the US has now become basically a racial headcount. So it's not really democracy anymore.
Interesting. Steve, we move on now to local matters. He's the best paid presenter and has a hugely successful podcast production company. So why is Gary Lineker reduced to wearing Next for Men on the telly?
The Times goes with the headline, Carte Blanche. I loved it in Lord of the Rings. I have no idea why they put it down here.
Yeah.
Gary Lineker's...
Well.
just put it in for no good reason. Gary Lineker's sponsored clothes irk BBC staff. They're under pressure to respond to accusations that the presenter turned up in some Next kit, which he's paid to sell, endorse and all that stuff. He was wearing it whilst presenting Euro 24, so a big audience possibly seeing this. Normally, I'm your resident Lineker defender, where I'd be saying, like, you know, just because you get some licence fee money, we don't know all your tweets, tweet whatever you like. But the rule is you can't wear stuff that you're plugging on a broadcast. Stick to the flipping rule. It's really as simple. It was a £55 sage green jacket and a £16 knitted T-shirt. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I can afford. Why is he wearing my outfit when he's a millionaire? The BBC spokesman said that they are regularly reminded of the guidance in relation to clothing, even if they're not doing proactive promotional work. Just, they shouldn't be wearing it. Also, we should stop Lewis going on about his calendars. Is that too much?
I would totally sign up for that deal. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, really, it's just, I mean, Gary Lineker, he's the perfect leftist. He avoids paying his tax. He uses his tweets as a sort of, that was used as a defence in court when he was in a court battle with HMRC over £4.9 million of tax. He uses his tweets as a way to say, like, look, I'm not just working for the BBC, I'm also a political activist.
Yeah.
So he virtue signals, but actually isn't living a good life. Whereas somebody like Lawrence Fox does the opposite of virtue signalling, but pays all his tax. So who's really the good person? Well, people have decided it's Gary Lineker.
Mirror now, Leo, and as they say, if the cat fits...
So it keeps working, that one, doesn't it? It came back for a second hit, that one. Oh, I got it twice.
So this morning's Cat Deely halts the show to issue a grovelling apology for an epilepsy joke. Now, I was really looking forward to a good epilepsy joke. You know what I mean? You're going to be disappointed.
No, it's really rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard much better ones, you know, like about how to do washing and stuff. But basically, she posted a clip of her dancing was posted, and people were mocking her dancing, and she said, "Oh, I'm just having a seizure."
Yeah.
And that was seen, even though like seizures aren't purely epileptic. My grandma was epileptic, so I'm allowed to say what I like about them. But you know, seizures aren't just to do with epilepsy. There's a variety of mental conditions that can cause them.
Absolutely.
Or having a fever.
Having a fever.
Febrile seizure,
Saturday night fever.
Well, I don't know if that's technically
seizure is just an uncontrollable contraction of the muscles, right?
Yeah. So she's had to sort of issue an apology, but she hasn't really. It's just a few tweets, and you know, there's no journalism anymore.
What it is, it's a similar thing. I made a joke at the expense of a certain demographic who experienced a certain slightly contentious medical condition, which I'm not even going to say now because it's not worth my time, on a Radio 4 comedy programme. And it was extraordinary, the deluge of tweets and demands for apologies. And I think what it is that these people, you know, but there are pressure groups and so on who are just waiting for the opportunity to get some free PR.
But at least you might have meant some pointed harm because you're a comedian. There is no way you watch that and think, oh, I'll tell you what, Cat Deely woke up that morning and thought, you know, I'm going to mock. No, it's just a comment that it's a deficit of humour.
Because you know who hasn't been getting enough? James Acash, the voice. Oh, yeah, the epileptic community. Anyway, Steve, the Daily Star described new drink driving legislation as a safety push. I'm sure that's not going to catch on, is it?
I'd
rather just walk.
So the UK drink drive limit could be shrunk to just one small drink. After urgent warning, the knee-jerk response to this is to think, OK, let's go in and complain about the government telling us what to do. But medical groups want it, motoring groups want it. Did a little look online. Alcohol groups, they all plug the Drink Aware website. That actually says don't drink anything at all if you're driving. It could cut it down to one small glass of wine. A girls drink, so no one's going to be drinking at all. But honestly, I think most people don't drink anything if they're driving in general, unless you live in the countryside. And it's great to go for a trip to the countryside and see someone absolutely still get tanked up and think, oh, it's all right, the tractor only does 10 miles an hour, so I'll be safe.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is a cultural thing, you're right, and it's also a generational thing, and I know my wife still refers to her family friends as the gin and jag brigade. There is a thing in the Kent-Sussex borders where, you know, it's understood if you take a certain route, you probably won't be troubled. I think that is a much more... But then again, that's not totally unreasonable, because you're much more likely to end up in the ditch yourself at your own expense than you are to run into a gaggle of teenagers on a, you know, who are huddled on a traffic island. I mean, it is slightly context-dependent. I'm not saying they can create laws that would be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you could have, you know, you've got the ULEZ. You could have the booze. The booze.
It's not unreasonable. Well, I've been saying for some time, really seriously, they have the technology, they could definitely do this now. The 20-mile-per-hour limit could be time-dependent, couldn't it? It could not be on, for instance, between midnight and 8 a.m. when there's no... or whatever it is. All kinds of things like that could be...
It's time-dependent near schools.
But, of course, this is... Well, exactly, that's the way to do it. But it is slightly... I do think with drink driving, all joking aside, it's so much easier not to have any drinks at all now, isn't it? Because it's quite low anyway.
I thought you were going to say it's easier to drive.
It's so much easier. Just your shoulders drop and you're just a bit more relaxed.
I can't believe that Simon was joking about drink driving. I shall be sending a tweet.
Just one section to go and you will be fully briefed. Stay with us for sexism at altitude, terms of endearment that require consent, and equal marriage for ladyboys. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today, we've got a veteran who endeavours to help those suffering from anxiety in all its various forms and manifestations.
Yes, over 3 decades, Simon Lee has established himself as a pioneer, seeking new ways to coach personal development and mental strength.
Oh, look, there's this famous phrase, isn't it, that hard times create weak men and weak men create hard times. Is that the kind of philosophy that your work is based on?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because as a child, I received a masterclass in how weak men create hard times.
Did you go through hard times as a kid?
We had 3 toxic men in the family, and they caused the family no end of grief, trauma and hardship. So, and at the time when you're going through it, you think, well, you can't help but fall into a victim mentality. You think, why me? Why am I going through this? But actually, I couldn't do what I do now without that masterclass.
Do you mind me asking who those men were?
Yep, it's fine. One of them was my stepfather.
Yeah.
One of them was my grandfather, and one of them was my uncle.
Right.
So they're all inner family members. And without exception, all of them, outside of the family doors, wanted to put themselves across as moral pillars of society.
How do you turn that story around and be the man that you are today and turn what you went through into a positive? How do you do that?
You've established that pretty much you can, you know, choose to be a victim of your circumstance or use it as inspiration to do better and say, you know what, when I'm older, for example, if you had a bad childhood, I want to make sure my kids get the kind of childhood I didn't have. So how do you relay that to the people you mentor now, I guess?
What we do, I set up something called Unlimited Courage. We talk about giving men a primary aim of courage. So we bring in philosophies such as Stoicism, our own 7 Courages, Bushido, and they love it. They love it. And I must admit, when I found it, I felt like I'd found the Holy Grail.
Wow.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News.
Britain's news channel. Well, welcome back to Headliners. For our final section, we have the Times now, Leo. Good news for anyone worried that hill walking was merely Islamophobic. Turns out it's sexist too.
Yeah. So don't mansplain or query her route. These are the new rules for male hill walkers. So male hill walkers have been offered new guidelines to make climbing Scotland's mountains more comfortable for their female counterparts. Probably put some flowers up there and a bit of carpet or something.
Soft furnishings.
Yeah. So they say don't offer to help them read maps or ask what route they're taking, and certainly don't call them darling or sweetheart. Just let them walk off into the mist to be eaten by a bear.
Don't mention the slaughtered lamb.
This is basically more. I mean, I can understand if a woman's hiking on her own, and they say, like, you know, if you're walking faster than her, don't catch up with her and walk alongside her. She's just going to be like, oh God, you know what I mean? A lot of this sort of makes sense, and I can see how somebody could accidentally do it without realising that they're being a little bit creepy.
And it was interesting, I read into it, I think these rules and suggestions and tips come from the wife of the guy who runs the mountain rescue outfit. So it's probably, my temptation is to kind of go, well, don't come crying to me if it turns out you were in distress. But I suppose, do you know what I mean?
She knows the way around
yeah, exactly.
But they also say, if they do ask for help, give them some help.
Yeah. You know? But don't touch them below the waist. It's difficult, though.
You need this stuff written down, don't you? But there's a bit where he actually asked a female hill walker, what can I do to not come across as weird? Well, stop asking that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to hurt you.
Excuse me.
I don't want to make you
come across
scream.
as weird.
I would never penetrate you non-consensually.
Can I just say, I've been hill walking for 40 years now, but never on my own, never over any distance, always with some mates.
Yeah.
And I can't, I mean, and that's me. I can't imagine many. Do women go hill walking on their own much? Hill walking is not a good thing to do on your own, to be absolutely honest.
I think
I did have a mate who was ex-army and he managed to die. You know. Seriously, that was about 30 years ago. But no, it is kind of. But he was, you know, he went out for.
Tweet you again. I can't believe he's joking about hill death.
I mean, this is the Munros in Scotland. So you know, much as we like to think Scotland's a rough and tough place, it's not like the Himalayas. So I mean, I do know people. I've been walking in the Munros on my own. Maybe not, right to the top on all of them or anything, but. I think a lot of them are quite well trodden, so you can walk on your own, and if you do break your leg, there's going to be somebody to shout out to.
I went walking, as a little celebrity anecdote. Ed Byrne is a huge fan of hill walking, and the Munros in particular, and we were at the Edinburgh Fringe, this was about 15 years ago, and he said, do you want to go for a hill walk? And I said, yeah, but I've got a show at 7. He goes, no, don't worry, I go overnight. And so we did. It was in August, and we got up there just after midnight to the nearest Munros, walked for about 6 hours, came off at like dawn, completely unpeopled. And I thought, why is Ed doing it like this? And as we got back into the car park, somebody went, Ed Byrne! Oh, God, I can't believe it. Can I have your autograph? And I was like, that's why he does it in the middle of the night, basically.
Lovely views. You didn't see a single one of them.
If you see Ed Byrne on the hillside, do not approach him. Do not ask him if he's
Especially below the waist.
So, no darlings or sweethearts on the hill, Steve, but you can sign away your dignity in old age. And I, for one, can't wait to hear sweet nothings bellowed into my hearing aid.
Care home residents' families being asked to sign permission forms so staff can call them pet names like love, darling or sweetheart. They're being asked to sign this way. Relatives of those living at the Norwood care home in Middleton, Suffolk, received these consent forms. What a waste of time. If I'm brutally honest about this is an older generation who can be called sweetheart without going, me tooing you and try and cancel an underpaid person who works in care. They've got thicker skin. Plus, also, the paperwork means it's going to be tricky. You need to remember that Doris doesn't mind being called sweetheart. John doesn't want any of it. Linda, you can call her the N-word, but only if you're of the similar ethnicity to her. It's difficult to... You could guess half of this anyway. But, serious point, my parents were in a care home up until 2020, and... it's horrible, the amount of paperwork you've got anyway. You've got to sign the deprivation of liberty, that one. It hits you and you've got to sign that one away. You've got to consider your do not resuscitate. Don't bring some pointless little paper around. Do you mind if we call them sweetheart?
Yeah.
Do your job, don't worry about that.
They will prefer it that way.
Of course they will.
It's always very regional as well, though, isn't it? And I remember there was that fella in EastEnders on the market used to call everyone treacle. I don't know whether you get away with that in other places. Somebody might think... What is he implying there? I don't know. But I think most people can understand instantaneously, even in their old age, whether they're being diminished or derided or somebody's showing
Absolutely. This is a few blue-haired people who like to moan about everything have ruined this for people.
Telegraph, Leo, the ever-growing thicket of Scottish tax legislation next.
Yeah, so people on more than £28,000 are considered high earners in Scotland, according to a Tory candidate. So people who earn this pay more income tax than they would elsewhere in the UK at an intermediate rate of 21%. I think it's 20% in the rest of the UK. And they also have, higher rates in the rest of the UK as you progress further up the tax brackets. But, I mean, it's insanity. £28,000. I mean, even for Scotland, that's not, a high earner in 2024, and it shows how these people at the SNP, parties like that, say that they're going to institute a progressive thing that's they're just going after the rich. They're never just going after the rich. They're going after people who can't afford to move to the Maldives.
It's true, and they always just want more money. That's the absolute. I think the thing about the tax code is, by common consent, it's just become vastly overcomplicated in this country as well as Scotland, and it just needs a huge overhaul, a flat tax rate. Just cut out so much of it, and just allow people to work hard in order to enjoy the benefits of extra income.
But as soon as you did that, you would have to start adding in things like incentives or relief if you want to invest, and then it becomes complicated again.
I'm not saying it can be on a single sheet of A4, but it's about 5 foot tall now, literally. Anyway, we've got about 20 seconds to discuss the home of the ladyboys of Bangkok becoming surprisingly late to the equal marriage party, Steve.
Yeah, Thailand passes historic bill recognising marriage equality, which is for a nation that is known for some people having close relationships with ping pong balls. This seems quite late in the day, doesn't it? They say that by bringing this in, there'll be the third nation in the area to do it, that it could change the area. But it also, in the article, says Brunei in 2019 introduced stoning by death for extramarital sex and anal sex, which if you've been married for a long while, lots of kids, you're out of options.
Absolutely. It has to be said, it will bring new meaning to the term Bangkok. Anyway, the show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. Daily Mail, Labour's secret tax rise dossier. The Telegraph, Britain 20 years behind Europe on cancer care. The Guardian, NHS will buy beds in care homes to cut hospital waits, say Labour. The Times, Starmer tax threat to savers with a chequebook. The iNews have UK in secret talks over financial turmoil at IT giant that could hit benefits and the NHS. And finally, the Daily Star have rise of the bog snackers. Please wash your hands. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. My thanks to my guests, Leo Kirsten, Stephen Allen. Andrew Doyle will be back here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Nick Dixon and Josh Howie. If you've been watching at 5 a.m. for breakfast, stay tuned for more. Otherwise, thank you very much and good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's staying fairly dry and fine as we head into Wednesday. Sunny spells for many of us, another dry day on the cards, however. Across the far northwest, there are weather fronts approaching, but for many of us, we've got high pressure dominating across the UK, and that's bringing all that dry and fine weather. Through this evening, though, there's a risk of some heavy showers still continuing for some northern areas of England, but elsewhere, a dry and clear night to come for many of us. We will see the clearest skies across the far northwest of Scotland. Northern Ireland too, where temperatures could dip down into the low single figures, but for most of us to start the day, we'll be at around 10 or 11 degrees. A little bit fresher tomorrow morning than this morning, but still plenty of sunshine around. Let's take a closer look at how things look first thing tomorrow. And actually, where it's been quite cloudy across the far north of Scotland lately, it's going to be a much brighter start tomorrow despite the chillier feel, and that sunshine will be spread quite widely across the UK into Northern Ireland, northern areas of England, North Wales. There'll be some cloud around here and there, but generally Wednesday's going to be a fairly fine day, and actually an onshore breeze across the far southeast could bring a slightly fresher feel here. But for most of us, plenty of sunshine to come through tomorrow. Sunny spells into the afternoon, cloud will bubble up a little bit. That may allow the odd shower to break out here and there, perhaps across the southwest, but I think you'd be pretty unlucky to get caught out in a shower. However, a different story for the far northwest of Scotland, into the Western Isles and the Highlands, where a weather front is approaching. Now in the sunshine, highs of around 23 degrees to come in the southeast, but widely into the high teens for many of us. Thursday's looking like another dry and bright day for the bulk of the UK. Temperatures climbing towards 24, possibly 25 degrees on Thursday, but weather fronts never too far away from the far northwest, which means it will be a little bit cloudier with a risk of rain here, but actually the